Thadwick first overheard it while shuffling past the kitchen door, nose raised with the solemn vigilance of a man forever prepared to be wronged. Clarabelle's voice rang with cheerful purpose as she spoke into her phone. "Yes, I'll be at the meeting under the awning." He halted mid-step, repeated the phrase slowly like a jeweler turning a gem, and felt the prickle of destiny at his scalp. "Meeting under the awning," he murmured, already composing a title page for the case. She ended the call and, still humming, penciled check marks on a list. Cups, napkins, change box, tablecloths, brownies. He hovered just inside the doorway. "A meeting," he said, testing the word. "Under an awning. It's the bake sale committee." She lifted a flyer with cartoon muffins as proof. "Gertrude will bring the folding tables. Millie's got banners. I'm on brownies and cash box." Her smile had the plain kindness of a small-town librarian. "Coded innocuousness," he said. "Classical technique. Hide the diamond in the jelly beans. Hide your imagination in that notebook and don't bother the neighbors." She kissed his cheek without looking and reached for ribbon. Boone, their black Labrador, watched from the floor with piercing blue eyes that somehow made his face look older than the rest of him. The dog's stare held for 3 long beats, while Thadwick tried to decide whether it was pity, disdain, or the wordless appraisal of a professional who has already seen how the mission ends. "You know," Thadwick told the dog. Boone blinked once slowly like an assassin deciding not to take the shot. "I shall investigate," Thadwick announced to no one, but with the gravity of a town crier, and Clarabelle, without pausing in her bow tying, said, "Please do not." The next morning found Clarabelle tying that same bow for the 3rd time, because apparently bows had a moral obligation to misbehave when you were running late. Thadwick leaned against the frame with a notebook under his arm and the expression of a magistrate who had slept badly. "Clarabelle, list the attendees." "Gertrude, Millie, Martha, Bernice," she said, counting on her fingers. "And 2 volunteers I don't know yet. If you show up, I will pretend I have never seen you before in my life." "Gertrude, Millie, Martha, Bernice," he repeated, writing each name down and assigning them brisk aliases aloud. The knife, the whisper, the cloud, the baker. He dotted each period like a nail. She didn't look up. "You're not doing that thing again where you rename people as if their lives were a deck of playing cards." "I merely record the truth others are afraid to say." He leaned in. "Has there been any unusual pigeon activity near the community center?" "They're birds, Thadwick. They live in the sky." "Yes, but lately their trajectories feel organized." "Please don't be organized." She lifted the brownies, kissed his cheek, and said, "If you embarrass me, I will make you apologize to every muffin." "Brazen daylight rendezvous," he muttered as she went out. Boone padded after her, paused at the door to pin Thadwick with a look that suggested a final gentle chance to become normal, and then followed his chosen human. He staked out the community center in the sedan, engine ticking as it cooled, notebook open to a clean page titled Operation Skyborne in blocky capitals. The awning itself was a sun-faded stripe of green that flapped lazily, and the parking lot smelled faintly of last week's rain. It presented to Thadwick's mind the exact stage on which villainy loved to pretend it was charity. "Subject C arrives," he whispered to the notebook as Clarabelle pulled in. "Cargo, brownies, thin folder." He raised his binoculars. Dossier disguised as recipe packet. Boone sprawled in the back seat like a rug someone dropped and forgot to pick up. Without lifting his head, the dog exhaled pointedly. "Don't editorialize," Thadwick said. He scratched arrows in circles around the words lemon bars twice, because emphasis looked important on the page. When Clarabelle joined the cluster of women, he labeled them quickly in his head. Gertrude the knife, her chin sharp and managerial. Millie the whisper, glasses sliding down her nose as she juggled banners and questions. Martha the cloud, cardigan shapeless as fog. And Bernice the baker, arms like redwood trunks as she hauled a tote of Tupperware. Movement snagged his eye. Above the awning, a pigeon perched like a sentry, its head cocked in the particular way that made pigeons look like they knew algebra. Thadwick inhaled. "Courier," he said, "primary winged operative." He wrote fast enough to make his hand ache. "Field note 47, confirmed presence of avian agent. Roofline of target structure, 15 to 20 feet above principal. Probable mission, reconnaissance and message relay. Intelligence indicates hollow bones can smuggle microfilm, feathers provide natural noise dampening, attitudes suggest command rank. The pigeon lifted its tail and, with the simplicity of the universe continuing to be itself, dropped a direct hit onto Thadwick's windshield. Another wet starburst caught the corner of his page. "A warning shot," he said, steadying his breath. He tapped the smear with the back of his pen. "Threat display. Classic." Boone opened one eye. It was the eye an expert opens when the novice mistakes weather for omen, the women conferred. Gertrude pointed to a clipboard. Millie adjusted the brim of her hat. Martha sorted napkins. Bernice lifted the edge of a box, and Clarabelle shook her head, laughing. The laughter, bright unafraid, traveled to the sedan where Thadwick translated it. "Code laughter," he whispered. "Acknowledgement of successful drop." He scrawled Field Note 48 with urgent loops. "Operatives acknowledge message. Target displays confidence. Network cohesion high. Recommend closer vantage. Risk escalating. Morale unbowed. Investigator likewise." Another pigeon landed beside the first, then a third. Thadwick pressed the binoculars so hard the rubber left faint crescents on his cheeks. "Reinforcements," he breathed. "The squadron assembles." Boone rose, stretched, and turned so that his shoulders faced Thadwick like a closed door. "We move," Thadwick said. He slid from the car, trench coat skimming his calves like a cheap curtain, and hunched behind a hedge just shy of the sidewalk. The grass dampened his knees. "Operatives exchanging trays," he narrated softly as he wrote. "Likely weapons caches disguised as lemon bars. Clarabelle receiving secret briefing from Bernice." Martha's purse shifted, concealment of reels confirmed. A new blot landed on the edge of his notebook, obliterating the word confirmed. He flinched and clapped the notebook shut as if protecting someone small and dear. "Counterstrike," he whispered. "They'll escalate." He peered over the hedge. The awning snapped once in the breeze. Boone padded into view on the far side of the lawn, sat at an angle that somehow included both Clarabelle and Thadwick, and considered the scene with a patience that felt expensive. For a moment, Thadwick thought he could hear the dog thinking, and the thought was a simple door closing. The pigeons erupted as if a silent bugle had blown them into the air. One beat of wings, then a dozen, then the many-footed drumming of shadows tilting over the grass. A splatter landed on Thadwick's shoulder. "Coordinated strike," he cried, raising his notebook like a shield. Another hit, this time on his cheek. He spun and slipped, the sole of his shoe finding the exact slickness required for humiliation, and he went down on one knee with a grunt that belonged to a much older man. He gathered himself and stood, dignified in the fashion of a person who pretends the world has bowed when it has simply bumped him. "Is that your best?" he yelled, and a pigeon answered with a plop on his forehead so precise he could have sworn it had been sighted in. The squadron wheeled with unnerving unity. He was suddenly, irretrievably, the center of a story whose moral he did not like. He flailed with the notebook, flapped his trench coat, and dared the sky. "Your reign ends here," he declared to entities that reigned mostly over statues. A pigeon the size of a stale baguette landed on a trash can and stared across the rim at him. "The Colonel," Thadwick breathed, pointing for Boone's benefit, though Boone was already looking away. "Face me." He lunged, tripped on over his own coat hem, slammed the trash can, and heard the ruckus ring like bad bells. Children at the far side of the lot pointed and giggled. An old man on a bench said something brief and unkind to the air. Millie paused with a banner, pastries for Parks, half unfurled, and whispered, "Is he fencing with nothing?" Bernice said, "He's losing, dear," with the calm of someone who had watched many husbands attempt ladders. A second wave descended. Dropping streaked his back, spotted his lapel, painted his coat with a map of a land no one would visit. He staggered upright, arms wide to show how badly he had been wronged. "I will not surrender," he shouted, to which the pigeons generously replied, "We didn't ask." He tried to retreat with dignity, then discovered he had stepped through a loop of his trench belt and effectively tied himself to himself. He tilted, windmilled, recovered, then tilted again, the human equivalent of a cabinet with a secret drawer. Boone, composed as an heirloom, watched without blinking. Clarabelle caught sight of him then, brownies trembling in her hands, and threaded through the little crowd with a look that mixed horror and resignation in equal measure. "Oh no," she said to no one and everyone. "Oh, Thadwick." He collapsed into the grass, notebook to his chest like a wounded comrade. "Surveillance complete," he panted. "Evidence overwhelming." She stopped 3 paces away because there simply wasn't any closer she could get without sacrificing footwear to the cause. "Thadwick Barnaby," she said, "why are you crouched under a public awning covered in— No, you know what it is." "You signaled them," he said, pointing vaguely upward with a finger that should have had a warning label. "You gave a tiny twitch of your ribbon, and they descended in ranks." "We were counting muffins." She spoke slowly, the way one addresses a person just freed from a chandelier. Gertrude put her hand over her mouth to contain a laugh and failed. Millie made a desperate attempt to look concerned and failed. Martha, sweet, foggy Martha, attempted a sympathetic "oh dear" and produced a snort. Bernice set down a tray and clapped her hands once as if calling the universe to order. The universe declined. "You commanded birds," Thadwick insisted, though less loudly. "You commanded them." He wiped at his cheek with his notebook and produced a smear that looked like a cave painting of disgrace. "Commanded?" Clarabelle repeated, staring at the notebook now smeared like unfortunate frosting. "We were assigning prices. Brownies $2, cookies $1, muffins $2.50. Gertrude had the quarters. That's what the signal was." She gestured, the smallest movement of fingers. "Counting." "The avian network is vast," he said, which was not responsive but felt noble. Boone approached and sat beside Clarabelle, eyes on Thadwick with the silent, clinical judgment of someone who has read the report twice and found fresh foolishness in the margins. "Embarrassed me," Clarabelle said in the soft tone that meant he could still recover his footing if he would simply stop providing the ground with so much to work with. "Again." "Embarrassed?" "No," he said weakly. "Exposed." "I exposed." "Shower," she said. "Then find me at the cash table and apologize to the muffins." He retrieved the napkin she offered, dropped it, bent to pick it up, and lost the argument with gravity. Behind him, the women laughed in overlapping harmonies and tried, without conviction, to be kind about it as they turned back to banners and trays. Boone fell into step with Clarabelle, pivoted once to watch Thadwick, and then trotted away with a tired patience that made the whole afternoon look inevitable. That evening, he sulked on the end of the couch with a towel around his shoulders and a kind of nightly gloom, while the washing machine negotiated with his trench coat in a back room. Clarabelle sorted socks into diplomatic piles. He said, "I was close." "You were covered," she replied. "They moved with military precision." "You parked under a nest like a display of target practice." She paired 2 socks briskly. "They could have given a seminar." "I had equipment loss," he said. "Binoculars." Notebook compromised. He sighed theatrically, then checked to see if it landed. It didn't. Boone stretched at her feet and exhaled a breath so deep it seemed to pass through several reincarnations along the way. The dog closed his eyes with the quiet satisfaction of a bureaucrat stamping "case closed." "If you involve pigeons again," Clarabelle said, not looking up, "you will sleep under that awning. You and your notebook and whatever dignity you have left." "I will adapt." He brightened. "Umbrella, goggles, perhaps a hat with brims in all directions. I'll design it myself. You'll join the committee," she said, tossing a sock into his lap, "and you'll stand behind a table selling brownies like a human being." "I will go undercover," he corrected. "Deep cover among the brownies. You will accept change and say thank you like the rest of us." She stood, stacked the folded laundry, and kissed the top of his head. "And you will bring Boone, who can supervise." Boone opened one eye at the sound of his name, decided supervision was beneath him, and shut the eye again. "He disapproves of me," Thadwick said. "He has taste," she said, but so gently he could pretend it was affectionate. "I was truly very near," he said. "Another hour and I'd have mapped the entire avian chain of command." "You mapped the sidewalk," she said, in a very personal way. He watched the last slant of evening fade along the far wall, and in a low voice observed, "The colonel watched me." "Trash can," she said. "High rank," he ventured. "Tin," she said. He was quiet for a moment, then asked, because curiosity and hope still lived in him, "What color tablecloths did you decide?" Blue, she said, with yellow napkins. He nodded as if she had confirmed troop movements on a difficult front. Bold, he said, resolute. Cheerful, she said. Please be the same. He thought about trying. He pictured himself behind a table making change with damp coins, smiling and not announcing any operations. The thought made him strangely tired and strangely hopeful at the same time. I can practice, he said. I'll greet the first customer. Hello, citizen. Which weaponized pastry? She held up a finger. He revised. Which dessert may I interest you in today? Much better. Brownies 2, muffins 250, cookies 1. Gertrude has quarters, exactly. He looked at Boone. You'll come, he said. Moral support. Boone executed a tiny sigh that contained both resignation and mercy. Thadwick pulled the towel tighter around his shoulders, breathed the clean smell of his own hair, and decided, for the night at least, to allow the world to be simple. He would be human in public for the price of a Saturday morning. He would try again at being ridiculous only in private. He said, I'm sorry. For what, she asked, though she knew. For embarrassing you, he said, and the muffins. You're forgiven, she said, because it was her favorite thing to do with him. She turned off the lamp. Please don't salute the brownies. I will nod at them solemnly. Perfect. The room softened. Pipes in the walls murmured like distant, reasonable pigeons. His eyelids grew heavy. Somewhere outside, the town's lone streetlight blinked. He thought he might sleep. Clarabelle, he said after a minute. Hmm? If the awning leaks, technically, no. Right. He folded his hands and tried very hard to stop naming people. It was like trying to stop tasting sugar once you'd started. Thadwick, she said into the dark. You're mine, not the sky's. He smiled where she couldn't see, and in the way of men who would like to be better, promised, tomorrow I'll carry the tables. Thank you, she said, because it is also a favorite thing to do. And that was the last time Thadwick confused pigeon droppings for proof of infidelity. Though once or twice, years later, he did nod gravely at an awning just to be safe. Original, heartwarming fiction every week. Subscribe for your next great story.